So I concluded that I wasn't going to be able to trust anything except anything based on evidence that I actually saw for myself. Because I would look up researchers in journals, and I'd see research that says cobalt's fine, chromium's fine, and I would get the researcher's name. It turns out he'd be a surgeon, so I'd look him up on the Dollars for Doctors website and find out, wow, he makes a lot of money from the drug company. So it just, I wasn't the best reporter, but my reporting skills kicked in, and I started seeing everybody's in bed with the drug companies. Everybody's in bed with the companies that are selling these devices, and therefore, who can be trusted? And so at that point, I realized these bellwether trials were happening in my state, just 3-4 hours away. So I started, getting up at 5 in the morning, drive 4 hours, sit in court all day, and learning the truth about my hips and the truth about how they came to market. And it blew my mind. At one point, one of the closing days of closing arguments, I just started to sob because I realized what the attorney for all the victims, the 5 or 6 victims, what the attorney for the victims was saying was true. And I just started crying so hard, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna draw attention, and courts are really formal, and so I started just like sketching to just distract myself, and I was just sketching what he was saying, and I sketched a picture of my hips from memory, and at that point I knew without a doubt it was true, and it was true that the hips were bad. It was true they knew. It was true they were paying doctors to continue to promote their product, even though they knew it was bad. They knew it was hurting people. And I learned that, the first whistleblowers, Tony Nargol and David Langton, first couple of whistleblowers came forward in 2007. I didn't get my hips for almost 5 years later. If they had done what's right, like if the company had said, oh my goodness, like, wow, what you're telling us is awful, let's just stop selling them and, regroup. But instead, as I learned in court, the people in charge said, let's just market through this storm. And that's why I got the hips, even though they knew they were bad, after they knew they were bad. So, ironically enough, because I hurt so much and I wasn't going to take drugs, I couldn't stand, I was just lying all the time. I'd lie in bed, and so I'd lay around in bed or sit in a chair because that's all I could do. And I stumbled upon blogs of other people who were having severe problems with metal and metal hips, and I connected with those people, and then I learned more about what had happened to them. And I had, because I had worked in TV and a lot of people knew me and they knew the situation, they knew I wasn't working anymore, and thankfully a lot of people cared about me. They'd say, oh, well, my friend had this and he had a really hard time, he wants to talk to you. And so I'd get anonymous phone calls from people who also had the metal hips, and they'd say, they're not going to tell you this, but this is true and it happened to me. These things are bad, and they cause, one guy who called me said, my friends just knew I wasn't right. I was in a lot of pain before the surgery, and then for a while it was okay, and then they said my personality just changed again. And that really matched what was the most awful part of this after the hips replacement surgery, which was just that something was wrong with my brain, and it was manifesting itself as, like I said, it was like I was a raging drunk, but I didn't drink. I wasn't on anything. It was just something like short-circuiting, or I don't know what was going on, but I'd clearly been told, you're not bipolar, you're not depressed, by a neurologist who had been treating me for months. So I got on Facebook and I got on Facebook and I saw so many other people were having problems with these hips, and I connected with them and I learned their stories, and I realized, because I was one of the last people to get these metal on metal hips, I was most likely the least damaged because they had been in my body the least amount of time. Some people had them 10 years already. I had only had them, 2-3 years at that point. And I started to learn they were affecting people's hearts and brains. I had one woman write me and say, my boyfriend, used to read, physics magazines just for fun, and he has seizure disorder so badly that he can't even write his name. And I stumbled across a lady who was my age, young kids like me, and her first indication that anything was wrong was she was having a cough, and it turns out it was her heart, and she was, mid-40s. And so she went to Duke and ended up being seen by a cardiologist, I believe one of the heads of cardiology in her hospital, a female doctor, and she came down and said, Julie, you have a metal hip that's failing, and the debris from it is destroying your heart. So she had to get a defibrillator implanted in her chest in her mid-40s. And now she needs a pacemaker, and she's had multiple ablation surgeries where they go in and burn the inside, around the walls of your heart to try to stop the erratic behavior. And I've since learned that the left ventricular wall of my heart and the septum are both thickening, scarring, which is something that happens at the beginning stages of cardiomyopathy. I have pseudotumors in both legs forming now, which are collections of debris that eventually destroy the muscle, just kill it. I still have a lot of days of pain. I'm doing better now, but some days I have to use my crutches. Some days I have to just not walk. And the worst part is, I realized as I was learning all this, a lot of these symptoms, vision loss, hearing loss, ringing in the ears, heart problems, problems with the brain, these are also problems that when they happen in older people, they're just assumed, oh, well, poor grandma, she's getting older. Well, what if it's not? What if it is the metal debris? I met a guy on a plane who, his dad had been a runner and he got a hip replacement, and he was hoping to be active again, and he had a massive, no, it wasn't on a plane, we were chatting back and forth. He's a documentary filmmaker, and I can't remember how we got connected, but I kind of told him my story, and he said, oh, that's funny. My dad had a total hip replacement. He was a runner and wanted to be active again. And he said, but he never really got the chance to see if it worked because he dropped dead of a heart attack about 6 months after he got the hip. And I thought, what if it was sudden heart attack related to cardiomyopathy? Of course, he didn't know what kind of hip his dad had. Most people don't know what kind of hips they have. And a lot of my friends who have these problems, they were never told, even after the problems became really apparent, hey, you have a hip that might be problematic, let's just monitor you. Many people aren't even monitored. Many people are monitored, and then the doctor does not call them to tell them the results, that their metal levels are high. That happened to my friend Julie when she had when she was having the heart stuff, she bothered to go back and look in her records, on the electronic records. You know, she signed into the portal and saw, wow, my cobalt had been 100, and they didn't even call to tell me. And this is what's killing my heart. So a lot of doctors seem to be sending everybody packing, saying, you know, we don't know what to do, we can't help you, or just simply refusing to take them as patients anymore. I tried to see a revision surgery. I tried to see a surgeon who does revisions, and I mentioned when I was making the appointment, I'm new in town, I need revisions, I have 2 metal on metal hips, made the appointment, got a call back the next day. He's not going to be taking you as a patient. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, he's not going to take any more metal on metal patients who need revision. And I said, well, I don't have a surgeon here. My surgeon's 1,200 miles away. I lost my job. We had to move. And doctors don't want anything to do with these hips now. And so many patients have said, you know, my surgeon dumped me after the surgery. He won't deal with this now. And so a lot of us, we have nowhere to go. I've just been waiting. I've been waiting to stumble upon a doctor who is trustworthy, who's not in bed with the drug companies, who understands this stuff is real, who will order the tests I need. I spent a lot of time on the phone one day with a fellow of one of the hip surgeons.